not have heard about Valerie and her wonderful husband, Mike. She is the Mother Teresa of what we do.
So this brings me to the piece, and I know that I'm just yammering too long here, but this is how we approach death, is this kind of courtship that we speak of death as a courtship, and living into the consciousness, awakening that consciousness of death. And this is, that's John Paul Taylor, and he just got a hand from, I don't know how I did that. That's fabulous. He would love that. John Paul died after the raid. We took care of him in our homes. One of our board members opened his home, and John was a remarkable guy. He could fix anything, and he did. He fixed a lot for many of us. This is John Bowers, and John had cancer, and he died shortly after the raid, about 3 months after. He had advanced cancer, and he told me that he really couldn't die until his caregiver, Jackie, got back from her vacation, because it really had to be all right with her that he died. And, you know, this is so much a part of how we live our lives and how we live our deaths, is how it's all right with the people that we love, how they allow this to be okay with them and allow us to die. Plus, dying's a long process. I mean, we make cells all the time. It takes a long time to convince the body to stop making them. So if you imagine that you have the opportunity to progress into your death, that if you presume that you're going to not have sudden death, but that you're going to, that death will approach slowly, then you have this great, in my belief, you have this great opportunity to embrace it and to not run from the Grim Reaper, but to turn around and begin this courtship, to face her and to take her even as your lover, and to do this dance that's so remarkable. And my experience after 26 years, friends and family members that have died, is that marijuana can open the door. People tell me this, that it allows them to accept something that wasn't so easy to accept before. They shifted their consciousness, just shifted it. So, mostly I spend a lot of time sitting by people when they're dying, and it's a great honor to be asked to come in and mostly shut up, not advise, and as Ram Dass always says to me, don't take your expectation with you, because you don't know how it should be for somebody who's dying. You don't know what their level of pain is. You don't know what it should look like. And you don't know what their journey will be. Maybe they will share that with you. This is Patty and Elizabeth. I must have somehow put sound effects in. They're nice, so anyway, as long as I don't give myself a hand at the end. This is Patty and Elizabeth, and they're great teachers and mentors and friends. And Elizabeth had a beautiful death. Patty was a Jesuit monk for many years, and he left his teachings and brought his teachings to all of his friends. And when Elizabeth was dying, it was a beautiful situation. We had the opportunity for music and song and chanting Tibetan Gregorian chants and Tibetan prayers, and she had a lovely and amazing death. And this is Margot and her daughter, her son, and she too mimicked that kind of death. She had a beautiful, remarkable death where all of us stood around her bedside, her family, her children, and we sang and we chanted, and she left her body and left us all saddened, but really recognizing the true miracle that death can be. This is Harry. This is something that Harry said to me. Harry was a pancreatic cancer patient, and he was a first-time user of marijuana. Really amazing experience that he had with it. And he said that marijuana allowed him to experience a shift in consciousness, and he used those words. And he invited me to sit with him in the exquisiteness of the moment. Well, if you've ever sat in the exquisiteness of any moment, when you're invited in by somebody who is in this holy, holy, holy place, it is profound. So this is Harry. I hope it's not too dark to see. It's not. And that's his lovely wife, Barbara. And Harry was I'll tell you just a little bit about him. He was an engineer, and he had pancreatic cancer, so he lived a very short time, 3 months. And he had never tried marijuana. So when he did, he had all the benefit of that first time. So I realize I'm slowing on time here, but I just want to mention that what happens in WAMM is a kind of communion. It's a communion of the richness of our lives, the joy that that brings, and the element of suffering, and the change that that brings into our life, the comparisons. It is the richest and most remarkable group of heroes that I've ever seen. This team of members went and locked the DEA behind closed gates, locked them in, and bargained for our release. These are the kind of heroes that I get to work with. So when I stand here and speak to you about our work, it's not work that's been done alone. All of you have been part of it, and there are almost 200 people at home that have worked with us to bring this here, and 140 of our members have died, 23 since the raid. It's something that we live with, and it's also the greatest gift because it helps us to prepare for our own deaths and maybe to welcome her as a lover. So I have so much more that I could talk about, but I won't waste time and cross into somebody else's. I thank you very much for having the opportunity to speak with you, and I also thank my friends and comrades in this movement. Thanks.
I mean, what else? I mean, there has to be something to create balance because we have created the imbalance.
I actually I don't really believe that.
Well, maybe I'm wrong.
But I love that we can talk about it that way. I think there might not be enough of us, and I think there might be a whole nother way to look at our resources. But I do think it's always about balance for sure, and I think that's why when you were talking about THC being synthetic and it's $800 a month versus getting the whole plant, where there's other things we may not have discovered yet. Mm-hmm. I think that's about balance. I think it gets imbalanced if you're trying to monopolize and not trust that you can let go of a monopoly and still benefit. Mm-hmm. Give access. Let people not be criminals.
Right. Well, I'm not stuck on any way that it is, and I'm not going to be around in a couple of thousand years, and I don't really, honestly, I'm not insensitive, but I don't really care what happens. I really don't. I think we save the planet, we're really interested in saving the people.
Yeah.
That's what we really care about.
I didn't know until we sat down to do this that you had grand mal seizures. Mm-hmm. So
and
I was just saying these CBDs for the sake of children, you wanted to do more work with, and how has that affected you? And
well, so I wanted to just say, to back up, because how I initially entered into this was not just with marijuana. And in the 70s, people were institutionalized for grand mal seizures. There was no place to put us, so it was considered a mental illness, whether it was traumatically induced or not. The other thing is that the brain at that time, because science said so, did not regenerate. No new cells were possible to be. Brain cells did not regenerate. So that was the truth then. Truth is, it's a movable feast.
It must have freaked you out.
Well, my life was pretty different in a moment, so freaked out. I didn't stay in a state of being freaked out, but yeah, my life changed in a moment. It was very different. So I did everything that was. I was in a car accident.
Oh, the car accident induced it.
So I tried many things. I planted. We sought alternatives. I moved out of the city because I didn't want to be seen as a freak and be institutionalized. I felt like I could not be around people because I wasn't like other people. And I wasn't. And I didn't want to be grabbed and put away. And I figured, science, well, they're not doing a very good job, are they? I'm paying every penny I have, and they're not doing anything. I'm still sick. But I am, talk about drugged. You can't get anything on the street that's stronger what the FDA can approve and stamp and sell. So, I mean, that's my experience.
Like Rick Simpson, same thing with him.
I haven't been all over the streets, but that's my experience. So I also, knowing at the time that DNA was a replicant, within my DNA was the totality of my being, my whole, complete, healthy self. I also did something else. Well, it's interesting to talk about it publicly because it's not something that I really have talked about or spoken about much. But I did many things. I planted a patch of grass and stood on it in the morning dew. I don't know. I read that it was good for epilepsy. Wow. And I went on a whole food diet, vegetarian, naturopathic application, plant medicines. Marijuana was the one that I ascribed to because we read this study and thought, well, I doubt it, but who knows? And I also spent time every day thinking about the part of my brain that held the information of my whole DNA, of my healthy brain. And, come to find out now, people are talking about it. However, I was concerned about being considered crazy, about being considered mad, and being swept up by my government and placed in a facility. Again, I repeat, that's what happened to people in the 70s who had grand mal seizures. So I felt by removing myself from society, I would be safer. And I would probably be healthier. And the reason I arrived there was sheer desperation. But I also grew up in the 60s, so I didn't have complete faith in my government, fortunately. And I wasn't being helped. So that desperation led me and Mike to seek alternatives. And in those alternatives, which were, as I say, a myriad of possibilities, I found the answer. The answer is not the drug. The answer is never, it's never the tool. And I think that's why we end up running from things or running to things. I don't believe it's the tool. I believe the answer is really in our understanding. And for every human being, that will be different. Do I know that's the truth? I'm not positive of anything. And the more I'm around other human beings, which I've worked with thousands of people, I've been by more than 100 of my friends' bedsides when they die. And the only thing I can say, and it's not for sure, but it looks like to me, because I haven't died, or if I did, I don't remember it, is that the way people live is the way they enter into their dying process. That's what it looks like. So that's why I don't worry about corporations, because they're run by people. And guess what? It gets to happen to them too. Will it be too late? For what? Is the world horrible? Is it all a blunder and bad? Not really. There are all kinds of people helping each other every single day in New York City on the street, on the corner downtown in Santa Cruz. There are actually more of us that are kind and loving and generous with one another because, in fact, I've never been bonked on the head by anyone or hurt by anyone, and I've been all over the world. So I think I live in a world that's getting better and better every day. But I'm in it for the long haul. I think we have a couple of thousand years of development. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. I don't really know. And I don't care if we do or don't. It doesn't have to look like that to me to be okay. But I do think that the more that we have the opportunity right now, in this moment, each one of us, to create greatness. It isn't so much in the eyes of the masses, because that's really not who we We're never who nothing says it seems to be or appears to be. But our own greatness that touches other human lives. And guess, God, that feels so good. It's its own reward. It's a win-win situation, so to speak. All you get is the benefit. There's just nothing wrong with it. So to give away marijuana or help other people, I mean, I'm surrounded by other human beings that have wanted to do that and have done that and have been heroes and teachers and mentors and children, and this is just a piece of what we do, and we're all equal. I see that the people that I work with are my equals. I'm not, they really are, and I would be a fool to say anything else.
It runs by a volunteer basis, right?
Yes. We ask for remuneration. We ask that people donate what it cost us to produce. They don't have to, but if
you won't turn anyone away.
Right, we don't turn anyone away. And you know what we find is that the more people we include, the easier it is to make that happen. And there are more people to volunteer. And today, people were making capsules in the back in the office, and we have to do it in our office because we don't really have any other place to do it. It's a really small facility. We don't have the money to grow. I'd love to not work in two different places.
What does that mean, the money to grow?
Well, we have to rent. We rent this office, which is built into an old warehouse. We're surrounded by 4 surfboard shapers and a guitar maker, and it's toxic, and it's probably not the healthiest place to be. It would be lovely to have a place where we could do everything and have a proper kitchen to produce our medicine in, and WAMM members could drop in. We can only afford to rent another site for about 4 hours once a week. So WAMM members have a very constricted time where they can pick up their medicine.
And where are the plants grown, the medicine?
On our land, and we donate that.
Is that outdoors or indoors?
It's only outdoors. Because
outdoors?
Yeah, because, I mean,
I heard that outdoors is healthier.
Well, it's different. I mean, it's certainly not, we don't have to pretend to be nature. It's different. Indoor is indoor, and I don't, I've grown a few crops indoor just so I know what I'm talking about, and I wrote a little primer about it. I'm going to publish it, just sort of like the novice, and I've spent more than 3.5 decades growing outdoors with Mike, and Mike is an agricultural genius. He's just a wizard. But you spend more than half of your life doing something, you ought to be pretty good at it. But I spent a few seasons growing indoors too, just as an alternative, so I would better understand what people were looking for, the problems, and also to help individuals who could not ever grow outdoors.
Right.
But you cannot mimic nature. It's not the same thing at all.
Right.
It's a completely different product.
I also saw on the YouTube that you put sage in your garden, and I thought how interesting that you would burn a plant to purify a plant, but it somehow felt right.
Well, we burn a plant when we smoke it, and it purifies it. And the interesting thing about vaporizing is you're vaporizing up until the place where it's burning. You're actually doing both when you smoke marijuana. You're vaporizing in.
You said it's important to grow your own medicine for the patient, so it seems, that's a whole lot different than, well, quite frankly, Mendocino is really kind of plagued by big growers that really are assaulting the environment when they're coming in and out for a quick kill and a big buck. That's kind of the feeling I got of the sage burning, that it was sacred. It wasn't, a cash crop.
Yeah, well, if it was a cash crop, we'd be able to pay our mortgage, which we have a very difficult time doing. Yes. Well, the real value is in its healing. It's, you can't put a price on a human life or human suffering. Actually, any suffering.
When did your suffering with the grand mal seizures end, or did they end?
It took several years. I would say in the late 70s, where I had the violent grand mal seizures, and I continued to have some prodroma, I still have prodroma or auras, which are indicative of seizure onset. But if you catch the seizure prior to its involvement, becoming full-blown, you can mitigate it. And there are many practices. There are some ancient practices, Hindu practices.
You mean yoga?
They're yoga. They're like eye contact yoga. That's a practice because it's drawing. This
For a
does
grand mal seizure, you look at somebody in the eyes.
Well, now
in the mirror?
I'm not saying you just look at somebody in the eyes. I'm saying being able to catch it in the when there's before the seizure onset. In some patients, we experience everybody's aura is different, or prodroma. It's an indicative of a seizure. It's a certain amount of time that indicates a seizure is coming. Not every patient, not every epileptic has it. No epileptic has it the same way that another does.
It's kind of like migraines. When I had migraines, 20 minutes before, I would have like a river come across my vision.
And they say that they're very similar. Migraine and seizures. There's a type of brain dysfunction or other function.
Could it be a type of inflammation that the CBDs are supposed to be good to alleviate? To bring down inflammation? Is it an inflammation?
I think it's more of an electrical.
Electrical, okay.
But maybe perhaps related to magnetism. The brain's a big mystery still.
Right. Do you think?
And I'm not a doctor, so I don't pretend to.
But do you think if you had done nothing for a couple of years, you would have naturally healed anyway?
Oh no, I don't.
You think it was the marijuana?
I know that marijuana really. When I say it saved my life, what do I mean by it saved my life? To be caught in the rigors of pharmaceutical treatment, while it is helpful and saves many lives, because I would not say that there's no room for the pharmaceutical advancement and use of marijuana that.
Even Rick Simpson says pharmaceutical grade is important. He longs for it because once he had a joint that addressed it better than anything else, but because of this topsy-turvy world and, the quality control of pharmaceutical grade not being there, he can't get it. So I think you're right. We need pharmaceutical.
Right, and also you don't want to roll up 10 joints in an emergency room. If you have you want something powerful and instantaneous. And somebody has a stroke, boom, you want to treat it instantly. You don't want to look for the best pot or find out who grew it or whether it's being grown by a cartel and does it have any, what grower is doing what, who's selling it, whether there's consistency. That's all. That is one thing that having grown it for decades, providing it within only, you won't ever find WAMM marijuana on the street. It just isn't. Nobody has it. It's not available that way.
Right.
And because of that, we've kept the purity of heirloom varieties over decades.
Mm-hmm.
We can guarantee that, but I don't know what anybody else guarantees. If you go to a dispensary today and you find something that works and you go back in 2 weeks, it's not going to be there.
So when
it has the same, it has Romulan today, is Romulan today the same as Romulan tomorrow or 2 months or at a different dispensary? Who knows? Who knows who's growing it?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows where it's grown, how it's grown, what it's.
I see. So you've stuck to the heirlooms?
There are specific strains that we acquired. We know their origin. And
that's why you say Mike's a genius.
Right.
I see.
And we've spent years breeding, and we've both done this.
I see.
They're particular to us. They're ours.
You're kind of like Brahmins, sort of like Ayurvedic traditions in India, where the knowledge is handed down and protected.
It's protected, and it hasn't. We haven't really. We do hope to be able to hand it on, but right now it's protected.
Mm-hmm.
And
so, when you say marijuana saved your life, can you elaborate?
Well, because
I distracted you on that.
How did it save my life? Because when you become involved in the realm of pharmaceutical treatment and you're confined to a specific formulary, particularly a Western tradition, it only moves on a certain strata. It doesn't. But your life doesn't move in that way. we change, and we are curious beings, and our physiology is complex. So you can not only treat one part of the being, you have to treat the whole person. So when you're ill for a long time, many things become depressed. People become depressed emotionally and become robbed spiritually or psychically, because day after day of suffering eliminates hope. Now, if within your suffering, you can find a way to minimize it, to expand your world, to include what happens as a person who's ill. Often become identified with your illness, but you're not your illness. Illness may be something you have, but it is not who you are. And in Western medicine, you become your illness because it only treats that. And we become marginalized financially, so it eliminates the possibility for us to get a wheelchair that allows us to go out to the beach, into the world, or to have interactions that are more normalized, more normal, and more matched with the society or culturally or that we live in. So one of the great things about marijuana is that it allowed me to live more normally. Like, I hid my illness from people. I was embarrassed to be an epileptic, to drool and to fall over in my soup. It's pretty embarrassing illness. But then if you have to drag your leg around behind you, that's kind of embarrassing. And people look and they stare. If you fall in your soup, people look and stare. So what you, as a person who's ill, we often hide it. We don't, because there's no place for us culturally. So we have to create laws like the ADA that allow us to be okay, to be served, to be able to get into a building. So marijuana saved my life because it allowed me to live some of my life more normally. But then what it did is it changed my consciousness, and that's what saved my life. Because the way that I looked at myself was different, and the way that I looked at the world around me. And I became far more generous and began to share. Mike and I shared marijuana with other people who were sick. And we began to see not early 70s, but the mid 70s, how it affected people's lives who had cancer.